Several weeks ago we started a new series on the fundamentals of the Kabbalah. We discussed the various concepts, the difficult concepts of the Kabbalah. Then we went on to explain the various parts of the Neshama. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yehidah. And B'ezrat Hashem we'll be speaking more about it next week when we speak about reincarnation. Tonight's topic is also related to the Kabbalah because it deals with something which is very spiritual, and that's called Ahava, love. But not only love, but Ahava b'mabat rishon, what the meaning is of love at first sight. People are a little bit confused and perhaps a little excited when they hear this idea of love at first sight. But in reality, love is a very powerful connection. It's a powerful creation. It's something very spiritual. And in order to understand the topic of tonight, what is love at first sight, I have to give you a long introduction. 2/3 of the lecture will be, what is love? Once we understand love, then we will go on to explaining what is love at first sight. So what is love? Well, it depends who you ask. In different cultures, in different languages, love is expressed differently. And I have spoken about this in the past, what love means to different people. Let's take a look at various languages and how they define what love is. And for those of you who are unaware, all the languages in the world come from Lashon HaKodesh. So many words may appear to you familiar, not by first observation, but if you look deeper into it, you will see the roots of many words in any language in the world. The origin of these words, the origin of the language, if you go back far enough and you see how it evolved and how it developed, you can trace it to the root of all languages, which is Lashon HaKodesh. So let's begin with the Latin languages. Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, French. The way they call love is amar, amor, amore. They all have the same similar root. And what do they all have in common? Which root of the Hebrew word? Ima. It's a motherly love. The way they express their ideas and their feelings in love, perhaps, stems from the fact that they interpret this as a motherly love, a love of proximity, of closeness, of attachment, like a mother that is attached to her child. Let's take a look at the Slavic languages, including actually English and German. The word in Russian, lyubit or lyubov, is the same root as the English word love, or the German word Liebe, or the Hebrew word lev, something in the heart, a deep feeling for someone. In Arabic, hub, habbi, has to do with the Hebrew word hiba, affection. In Persian, there's actually several words to describe love. One has to do, as I've mentioned in the past, with friendship. There's friendship involved. There's some sort of connection. And the other Persian word really comes from Arabic, and they also use it in Turkish. It's the word ishq. And the word ishq comes from the Hebrew word teshukah, which doesn't really mean love, but means passion or infatuation. In Aramaic, you will find the word rahima, or rahimu, which is also the word used for a friend, but the root of that word is rahamim, compassion, to feel for someone. And in Hungarian, for anyone who knows Hungarian, szeretet is the word used also for I want or I desire, the same word used for love, something that you want for yourself. But what is really love? Well, for that we have to look at Lashon HaKodesh. In Lashon HaKodesh, the word for love is ahava. And the meaning of ahava means have, to give to someone else, to be concerned for the well-being of someone else. It has nothing to do with wanting something for yourself, and that is the big difference. True love, therefore, spiritual love, means that you have an interest in someone else, not because you want him for yourself, to satisfy a need, but you want to care for someone. You want to really give to him. You want to love him or her, not because you want something for yourself. And that is a very, very big difference. However, it doesn't mean that there isn't any other type of love, because love occurs at various levels. At the lowest level, love is, as we said, a connection, some form of connection. And I've put together here 7 types, or the basic types of connections that there are between human beings. The lowest one being seeing each other. When two people look at each other, they're forming a connection. It's a very simple connection, very low-key connection perhaps, but it's some form of connection. What's higher than seeing each other? Talking to each other. There's communication. There's a little bit more of a connection, a little bit more of a bond between the two individuals. They're talking. What comes after talking? Shaking someone's hand. Now you're forming a physical connection with the individual. You're grabbing him with one hand. Well, what will follow a handshake? A hug. Because a hug is done with both hands. And you hold on to, and you're holding on to the person for maybe a little bit longer than a handshake. What comes after a hug? When you actually give something to the individual. You give him a gift. You give him something that was yours that you wanted to be his or hers. Netina. That is also a very powerful connection between two people. What comes after netina, which is something physical? Neshika, a kiss. That's not only physical, it's also spiritual. It's a very powerful connection. And we're not going to get into it right now, maybe next week. There's different kinds of neshikot. There's on the head, on the hand, on the lips, on the cheek. The Zohar speaks about the various types of neshikot, what they really mean. Even though people misuse them and they don't know what they're doing, but it has a tremendous amount of meaning in how one connects to those he loves. But the highest form of physical connection we talk about, not love, is the actual interaction, or I shouldn't say interaction, but the actual intimacy that exists between the husband and wife. B'kedusha, when it's done in a holy framework, through nesuin, through marriage, that connection, called bi'ah, Lashon HaKodesh, is the highest form of physical connection. As the Zohar says, and as it is elaborated in the Kabbalah, the moment a husband is with his wife for the first time, they join their nefashot together when they are physically together. Not only is there a physical connection here, but you're also forming a spiritual connection. The Rabbi tells in the Gemara, Asur le'adam shekadesh et ishto ad sheyir'ena. One cannot be mekadesh. In other words, one cannot marry a woman until he first sees her. There's different interpretations of what the rabbis meant, but what did we just say? That seeing is the first connection. It's an important connection. You have to see who you're marrying. You don't want to feel terrible. Oh, why didn't I get a better look? I'm disappointed. Get a good look. It's important. You're making a connection on the very lowest level, but it's an important connection because seeing allows you to judge. It may not be a very good judge. It may not give you everything you need to know about the person, but it is something, it helps. So the first step in the first connection between man and woman or between anybody is seeing each other. We've spoken about different levels of love. What is not love? Passion. What's the difference between passion and love? The simple difference is because in passion you're expressing something that you want for yourself, something that you are lacking, that you want to satisfy. Whereas what did we just say love really means is to give, not necessarily to take or to receive. So there are different levels of love, but what love is not is passion. And people tend to confuse the two, as we will be speaking about tonight. There's a lot of confusion as what is really love and what is only passion. The simplest difference between the two is what the rabbis tell us. There's something called ahava shekluya b'davar and ahava shelo tluya b'davar. There is a love that is dependent on something, on the beauty, on the money of the individual, on just plain physical attraction. It's talui b'davar. And what happens when that something that the love was depending on disappears? Then the love will disappear. If in the very beginning the two got together only because of the money or the beauty, the physical attraction, and that disappears with time, and it may disappear. Money does not last forever. And beauty may also disappear. People gain weight. The men go bald. And there may not be as much physical attraction. So that's ahava shetluya b'davar. Batel davar, batel ahava. If that davar goes away, so will that ahava. But a true ahava is ahava ruchanit, a spiritual love. It's ahava shetluya b'davar. It has nothing to do with the physical. It's completely spiritual. That is why it is lasting. Nevertheless, even though passion is not love, the physical attraction is not everything, Hashem did create something called meshicha, or physical attraction. And the fact that it's created is because there is a need for it. Because even though we're talking about something spiritual, there's a spiritual connection between two people, there needs to be also physical connection. After all, we are here, our neshama is enclosed in the body. The body has to feel something too. And the way for the body to feel, if it connects to someone on the lowest level, is through some sort of attraction. Just like there is magnets that attract, metal is attracted, there are certain things that attract people. And we've spoken a little bit more in detail about it when I spoke about astrology. There's just certain things that pull people together. Hashem made that for a reason. There needs to be, on some level, a physical attraction for the bodies to connect. The bodies need to connect. The bodies need to feel good about each other. So that does exist. It needs to exist. But we must not forget that the ultimate goal of marriage, for example, or friendship, is the chibur ha-neshamot, not the chibur ha-gufot, the connection of the souls and not of the physical body. Because we're interested in something which is lasting. And for a relationship to be lasting, it has to be spiritual in nature, not just physical. And that is, as I said earlier, the idea behind wanting to give and not just wanting to receive. The highest connection between a husband and wife, man and woman, is called da'at. We've spoken a little bit about the sefirot, and I may have mentioned da'at. I don't recall if I did. In any event, what da'at really means is knowledge. But knowledge is chokhmah. What's the difference between chokhmah, binah, and da'at? Chokhmah is the plain knowledge, the plain information. Binah is the understanding of that information, and da'at is the application, absorbing it, taking it for yourself and using it. Da'at means you possess the knowledge. You just don't know about it, you also possess it, and you apply it. The highest level of love between a husband and wife is called da'at. Like the pasuk says, "Vayeda Adam et ishto." He knew her. Knew her means that he possessed her. They became one unit. That's the highest connection, when there is da'at. And that is what the Torah means in Pashat Bereshit, when the Torah speaks about marriage, that the ultimate goal between a husband and wife is for them to be one flesh, to be one unit. Why is the Torah revealing this to us? In order that we remember that if a marriage is to succeed, the two have to have that desire, that interest of being or becoming one. If that's not the goal of the marriage, it's just to share the same house, then obviously they may not last long together. There must be a true interest. The man must have that interest, the woman must have that interest of succeeding. And what does it take to succeed? Is to want to become one. If they don't want to become one, if they don't want to share everything, then that's going to be a problem. That should be the goal of every marriage. Therefore, someone who wants to give by nature, or he has trained himself to be giving, his chances of success are greater than the one who just is interested in himself. In the Kabbalah, when we spoke about Sefirot, I also mentioned Chesed. For those of you who remember, Chesed is on the right side. So the rabbis tell us in the Kabbalah that true Ahava comes from that Sefirah, from Chesed. Because what is Chesed? Chesed is always good. Chesed does not make distinctions. It does not say, I only love if everything is the way I want it to be. Chesed is always good, regardless of the individual's ma'asim, of the individual's deeds. When the Midat HaChesed rules the world, and it will rule B'ezrat Hashem eventually, right now there is also Din, but when Chesed will rule, then Hashem would of course overlook anybody's faults. Because it's only Chesed, it's only good. True Ahava, therefore, does not know any limits. It does not look at the faults. It has no preconditions. It's Ahava, Gemura, complete Chesed, only to do good. In speaking about Ahava, between husband and wife, between two friends, we must always remember that there's something even more powerful and greater, and that's called Ahavat Hashem. But in order to appreciate what Ahavat Hashem is, we need to understand what Ahavah between two individuals is. Because Ahavat Hashem, for example, true Ahavat Hashem means that you accept Hashem, love Hashem, even if you're not doing well. Even if financially you're having a hard time. Whether you're having a good time, an easy time, or whether you're having a bad time, you still love Hashem. That is true Ahavat Hashem. You don't say, I love Hashem, I'm a good Jew only when things go well for me. If they don't go well for me, I stop praying. I stop doing mitzvot. So true Ahavah, just like between human beings, true Ahavah means you accept the person the way he or she is. You accept Hashem, regardless of your situation, your personal situation. The ultimate test of that Ahavah is when a Jew is willing to give his life, Mesirut Nefesh, Al Kiddush Hashem. In other words, even though he's about to lose his life, but because of his Ahavah to Hashem, he's willing even to give up his life. In the Kriyat Shema we say, B'chol levabecha, right? Ve'ata et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levabecha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meodecha. That the love to Hashem has to be on all levels, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your possessions. And the rabbis ask, why does it say with all your hearts? We only have one heart. And one explanation is, B'shnei yetzarecha, with your two yetzarim, with your good instinct and with your bad instinct. How could you love Hashem with your bad instinct, with your yetzer hara? One explanation given is that when you are confronted with a situation, with a challenge, to go against the Torah, and who's giving you that advice? The yetzer hara. And you control that yetzer. You overpower him. And you do so for the sake of Hashem. That means that you're showing love for Hashem. I'm giving up this desire. I'm controlling my yetzer for you, Hashem. The same is true when we're dealing with love, true love between two individuals. You're willing to sacrifice. You're willing to give up something for that individual. You're willing to do something which is very, very difficult for you to do. But you still do it nevertheless. That shows true love. Many of you, however, have heard that there are times when people are turned on by someone, right? You've heard that term? What is that? He was turned on. Just like there's turning on, there's turning off. Turning on, even though it can be ahava, something about a person that he or she sees they like, but that can be a very temporary sensation. It doesn't mean it's not real, but it could be very temporary. Because true ahava is not just being turning on. As we say in the prayer, it's mentioned several places, Ahavat olam ahavticha. Hashem says, my love for you is not temporary, it's permanent, it's eternal, it's forever. It's not that one is just turned on. Permanent love means that one is able to forgive the other for his or her faults. Because it may happen that there is a love, a connection, a strong connection between two people, and one of the two made a mistake. Or let's say it was not a mistake. Let's say they actually intentionally did something, not very, very bad, but bad enough. Could the love still continue to grow, to be with them? Is it possible? It all depends what it is. Obviously, if somebody is treacherous, if somebody betrays the trust of the other, it's going to be a big problem. It all depends how it happened and what the circumstances are. If it happened by accident. True love, permanent love, a love that is not just turned on, is a love that one is willing to accept the other and to be forgiving for his or her fault. Because these things may happen. And where do we learn this from? From Hashem. Hashem is forgiving. Hashem says, I love you. My love for you is a love of eternity. How could that be? We've sinned. We've done terrible things. Hashem overlooks. He ignores. Because He has a true love, a continuous love for Am Yisrael. In order for a love to be enduring, and not just for it to be turned on and turned off, it has to have the capacity of forgiving and accepting everyone the way they are. Alright, so we've reached the point of I think we all understand approximately what love is. Now we have to go to the next step. What's the purpose of love? HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates marriage with one in mind. What's the idea of marriage? So if you look in the Torah, you will see, because it says Pru. Man needs to procreate, so he has to get married. Men and women have to get married so they can have children. But that is just one meaning, one idea. In reality, the purpose of marriage is a vehicle for one to demonstrate true ahava. One may live his life not having too many friends, But if he's lucky enough to marry his soulmate, and he's a good man, he will discover true ahava. Marriage is therefore a vehicle that Hashem created for one to feel and to express ahava. That is the idea of ahava. What for? Because this will allow us to express ahava to Hashem. In the same way the commentators explain one of the ideas behind mitzvat kibud avayim, of honoring one's parents. What for? Besides the logic of honoring one's parents, after all they take care of you, one of the ideas behind the mitzvah is that if we recognize what our parents do for us, that they feed us, they clothe us, they take care of us all these years, we will come to realize and appreciate how much Hashem does for us, how He takes care of our livelihood, how He gives us health, life, and children, and we will come to love Him. So the mitzvah of kibud avayim is a vehicle to reach ahavat Hashem. The same is true with marriage. Marriage has a tremendous potential. It's a very powerful vehicle to express ahava and to feel it. And once one is able to feel it, he can imagine or have an idea of what ahavat Hashem is. Rabbis tell us that if the two are lucky and they meet each other, in other words, those who are soulmates, each one become an ezer kenegdo. Ezer kenegdo means a help. Where one is lacking, the other one makes up. And some of you may recall the Midrash. The Midrash says that when man was created, he was a combination of male and female. And there was a stage called Mesirat HaNekeva, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed the female part of this human being, and then brought them face to face. What's going on? What was this all necessary for? Why did Hashem create two of them separately? He had to first create them as one unit, then separate them, then bring them back together. But the idea behind this step called Mesirat HaNekeva is that Hashem is reminding us, in reality, you are one. You are one. And therefore, I want to separate the two of you, and I want you to come back and complete yourself by joining the other half. And if you do so, you will become one again, one unit. So you should know in advance, especially if we're dealing with soulmates, you are one. In reality, the two of you are one, and you can join, and you can become one unit. There's no reason why you cannot love each other, because you are part of the same. Hashem separates the two of you, but it is your job to make it happen. That is the goal of marriage. The rabbis also tell us that marriage is like Kriyat Yam Suf. It can be like Kriyat Yam Suf, like parting of the Red Sea. Why do they use the term parting like the Red Sea? Because what do you have in the Red Sea? What do you have in the water? You have water. But you have one unit of water. The water is never split. You cannot split naturally. What did Hashem do? Hashem split the Red Sea. He took something which really is bound together by nature, and He split it. In the same way Hashem says that I split that which is bound by nature, I can bring back two people who are separated and connect the two together. Hashem is therefore involved in the marriage of two individuals. He takes one who may be living in Israel and one who is living in America and brings them together. How does that happen? Because in reality they belong together. In the same way Hashem can split the waters which are bound together, He can bring together two individuals who are now separated and bring them back to form one unit. But what is required in order to bring these two people together? Let's take two pieces of wood. These two pieces of wood came from the original tree. It was once upon a time one piece of wood, and we cut them in half. Can we glue them back together? And will it be easy for them to hold on? In other words, will they glue? Will they stick? It's the same two pieces of wood. The answer is yes, on condition that there's no lichluch, that there's no dirt on any of the two. Because if there's any dirt on any of the two pieces, then you try to put them back together and it just won't stick. In order for the two that were once together to come back together, it has to be smooth. There can't be anything separating the two of them. No dirt, no lichluch, no nothing. The same is true with human beings. In order for the two to come back together, there can't be any dirt, there can't be anything separating the two. What separates people the most? When people have an interest in themselves. They're thinking of themselves. That is what separates people most from each other. That's what creates distance. People are interested in themselves. Therefore, what is required for people to really to glue the opposite, something called in Hebrew anava, humbleness. Humbleness, the Rabbi tells us, leads to hitbatlut. Hitbatlut means that one, I don't know how they say it in English, hitbatlut, umevatel et atzmo. In other words, he cancels himself. He doesn't consider himself first. He's therefore able to consider the other person's wishes. That is why Moshe was chosen as the leader of Am Yisrael. Because what midah that Moshe had, what characteristics? Anava. He was the most humblest person on the planet. One who is humble is able to tolerate other people. He's able to tolerate their faults, and therefore he's able to love them. No matter what they did to him, and he had a hard time, Moshe. Very hard time, but nevertheless, he gave his life for them, because he was anav, he was humble. So what's necessary for two people to really glue is that each one does not consider himself, and in order for that to happen, one has to be anav, humble person. Now we've reached the point of, okay, now we understand what love is all about, how powerful the connection should be, but what do we do when we're dating? I'm not going to be speaking about marriage, but you can apply this to any friendship, any situation. When one is dating or getting to know the person for the very first time, how will he know the difference between a physical attraction and that this is true love? After all, there is a need for physical attraction. We just said that Hashem created that too. There's a need for that. But how will we know if that's all it is, or whether this can truly develop into love? Rabbi Elyahu in his Sefer Michtav Eliyahu, writes something very important about this idea. He says, in any place where there is a Yetzer Hara, there can be room for error. And we know that the Yetzer Hara, the evil instinct, works through physical attraction, because that's related to passion, something that you want for yourself. So Rabbi Elyahu says, any place where there is room for the Yetzer, one can make a mistake and misdiagnose what he is seeing or what he is feeling. So how are we supposed to know? How are we supposed to know what it is that we are feeling? Because maybe there's a Yetzer Hara involved over here. So he says there's no way for one to know unless he's God fearing, unless he's continuously battling his Yetzer to become a better person. As we just said, unless he is humble, he is in control of his Yetzer Hara. The more one is the more one is in control of his Yetzer, of his instincts, his evil instincts, the better judge he will become. One who becomes humble, for example, it will be easier for him to give of himself to someone else, and in the same way it will be easier for him to tell if what he is seeing is also giving from the other side. Perhaps it's just a nice smile, perhaps it's a fake smile. What are we seeing here? Is it true? Is it pure or not? Well, it depends on the impression that we are interested in something b'shem shamayim. In other words, we have no interest in it for ourselves, then the chances are better that what we will be seeing is pure or not pure. In other words, we will be able to be better judges to determine what it is that we're seeing depending on what it is that we are expressing. Whereas the more a person is into himself, the more of an egoist he is, the more selfish he is, there's less room for acceptance of other people. Where humbleness allows or tolerates others, one who's selfish, he's full of himself, there's no room anymore to accepting someone else. That is why some people will always have a hard time loving other people. It's not that they're not seeing somebody who loves them. Yes, that other person may actually love them and care for them. But they will still have a hard time loving because they're so much into themselves. So a person who's humble, who has worked on himself, who's in control of his Yetzer, is not only able to give of himself into this relationship, he's also able to be a better judge as to what is being shown to him, what is being expressed to him. You remember perhaps in Parashat Bereshit there is a saying there, Adam HaRishon says when he gets together with his wife, now I feel that this is a part of me, it's part of my flesh. What is he really saying? What he's saying is that for one to really succeed in any relationship, one has to have a true desire of becoming one with the other person. Equality. If one ever feels superior to the other person, it's going to be a problem. He will have a difficult time loving that person. There are many things that make love difficult. In other words, you may actually have met someone who is a perfect match for you. It has the potential for a good marriage. But are you treating it with the proper hashkafa, with the proper outlook? I want this to be mine. In other words, I want this to work out where we're both equal, we're both the same. Etzem yatsamai. If that's the case, then the chances are better that it will succeed. Now we've come to the last point. I'm sure many of you are curious. So since love can be deceiving, what is love at first sight? What people say that they feel. They feel something clicking. They feel that something is just so comfortable. They're in love. According to the Kabbalah, what one is seeing is something healthy. I didn't say that it's something true. I didn't say that it's reliable. I said it's healthy. Because what you are sensing or what you're feeling is the true potential that you have to love someone. Imagine this man or woman who has just fallen in love, like they say in English. Imagine if they stay fallen in love for the rest of their life. That would be beautiful, right? But that does not always happen. It lasts for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, maybe 1 year. Nobody feels the same. For those of you who are single, I'm letting you know, nobody feels exactly the same in year number 1 as in year 25 of the marriage. It doesn't mean that their love is not strong. Of course, it can be strong. Because as we will soon see, love can grow, and it should grow. But the first sensation of something new will not be there 25 years from now because it's not new anymore. That is one of the reasons of what the Torah commands the Jew to stay away from his wife for 11 or 12 days a month. There should be some rejuvenation, something new. A honeymoon once a month, what a beautiful idea. Yeah, that's one of the ideas. But the very first moment of one is excited, it can or cannot be love. We don't know yet. And I'm going to tell you how we can know. But the initial feeling is healthy because all it does is remind you of what the potential is. Imagine if this is the feeling that you can have, and it depends on if you want to have. This is what hopefully you'll be feeling many years from now too. You have that great feeling that you feel in love with someone. That is the feeling that you can have if you wish. So the Kabbalah says that love at first sight is healthy because that is something beautiful and something that should exist. It's something that you can attain. It depends on if you make it happen or not. We have not yet determined what this love means in reality between the two people. All we've determined is that this is a great potential. Oh, I never knew I could love someone. You know, a person who's growing up, all of a sudden he really likes someone. Well, what is it? Well, first of all, you should know that this is the feeling that you should have when you get married. Not just when you're dating. This is the feeling that one should have. This is what he should strive for. This is what he should aim for. This is an indicator of what a person can actually attain. That kind of a feeling. In other words, if you feel very strongly about a person, that in itself is an indicator you can. You can have this if you want to. Whether you will or not, obviously, will depend on many other things. But you can have this. You can have this feeling. You can reach that point in the relationship with this person. The way you feel now, if you want to, you will be able to feel that down the road. But there's no proof from this first observation whether this is real love or not. If this in fact is true love, then the rabbis tell us that even though it was love at first sight, it will still continue to develop deeper and deeper roots. In other words, what one is seeing the first time around may be true. It may not be. But if it is, then it will develop further. It will make roots just like a tree that you plant. It will grow roots and it will become more and more stable. Now, however, we come to a very difficult question. And I'm sure some of you may be thinking of that, well, why is it that some people just know it right away? And for some people it just takes longer? Isn't that a good question?
Everybody would love to know right away. And they would love to feel good the first date. And it doesn't happen immediately. And many of you perhaps have heard what the rabbis tell us. Love grows, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, which appears to be a contradiction to what I just said. I mean, there can be something called love at first sight. Does love grow? The answer is yes. Does love take time to grow? Of course it does. Can love be there the very first moment? Yes and no. How do we know that there is love that grows and love the very first moment? Well, let's look at the Torah. In the Torah and Tosha, we have examples of everything. Everybody likes to point to the example of the love between Yitzhak and Rivka, because that is typically an example of love growing. He meets this young girl. There's no love yet. He doesn't know her. They didn't date. And only after he marries her does the Torah says Vaye'aveha, that he loved her. Typical example, an example that the rabbis use to remind people, don't worry if there's no love, you don't feel that right away. It will take time. B'ezrat Hashem, there will be roots, and the love will grow, and you will come to love. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't have good feelings in the beginning. You need to have some good feelings, but real love you can't have. Forget about that. It will come with time. But how come they do? How come he does? And he says he felt that way. And there are people who will tell you stories that the moment they saw their husband or their wife, they knew it's him. And they were right. They weren't exaggerating. And they were blessed with a beautiful life. But they just knew it right away. As soon as he entered that room, I just knew it. As soon as I saw her, I just knew it. And they were right. Many times they're wrong, but sometimes they're right. What is it? How come some people know it right away and some people it takes longer? So the Torah gives us examples of each. I just gave you the example which is more typical. You have a good feeling, you need to have a good feeling, but love takes time to develop. And then you have the other example. What's the other example where there was instantaneous love in the Torah? We just read it, Yaakov and Rachel. So if anybody ever tries to convince you that love takes time because he's hearkening Yitzhak to time, say, well, what about Yaakov and Rachel? As soon as Yaakov saw her, he loved her, he wanted her, he didn't want anyone else. That is an example of love at first sight, instantaneous love, even though it's not mature. Because regardless of your situation, love needs to mature. You have to get to know the person. Roots have to form. And that will take time regardless. But there can be a very, very powerful feeling in the very moment, the very first moment that you're seeing a person. What's the difference? In the third example of David and Bathsheba, you actually see a combination of two things. You see him being attracted to this woman who happens to be his zevuk too. It was meant for him. But there's also a certain amount of desire. And because of that desire, he took her a little bit too early, the rabbis tell us. Had he waited, everything would have worked out as fine. But there was also something strong that he felt. But that feeling that he had was combined with a little bit of desire. Nevertheless, his judgment was not wrong. She was meant for him too. In the Kabbalah, it is mentioned that true love, regardless of how and when it happened, takes time to mature, takes time to develop, because it needs to develop in the mind. Here we have an individual who was used to just taking care of himself. Now he has to share his life with someone else. And this is true in a friendship, to be giving to someone else, to share, to be one. In order for that love to mature, the seichel has to get involved. The mind starts to analyze. It's for me, it's not for me. He's like this or she's like that. The mind has to digest what the heart just absorbed. And that is the simple reason of why love takes time to develop, because it has to sink in. So initially you have a good feeling, but hopefully with time roots will be formed, and you'll be more and more convinced, yes, she's for me, he's for me. It will be a real ezer kenegdo, where one is actually filling in for the other, where one complements the other. So much so, to the point when one feels, I just can't be without her, or I can't be without him. They're really one. That is the ultimate. That is the best kind of a relationship, where one just cannot be without the other. They want to be together, because they feel that they're one. There's nothing separating the two of them. That takes time. And if with time one sees that happening, that's a very positive sign. That means that they have formed a connection, and that connection has a very good potential of becoming even a deeper connection. Mashal Emad, I don't know what is this compared to? To pregnancy. Pregnancy takes time. It doesn't happen overnight that a child is born. Why? Because the fetus has to develop. The same is love. The same is with love. The Kabbalah says it has to develop, it has to grow with time. But what about those other individuals that had it right away? In their case, that love was able to penetrate directly into the mind and become instantaneously absorbed without further analysis. That's what happened. With one, it took time to develop because they had to feel it, they had to live with it and see what it's like, digest it. And with the other one, for some reason, it just went straight, no barriers. It was completely automatic, totally accepting, no doubts, blindly. How come these things happen? That one is able to immediately absorb without further digesting it in his mind. He just knows it right away. Where does that feeling come from? In other words, the purer the neshama, the purer the person is, as we said before, the better judge he will become. His observations will be a lot more accurate. And this individual who has a pure mind, if he happens to be humble too, then he will be able to feel tremendous emotions and feelings that come from what? They come from being able to identify if that individual is from the same Shoresh HaNeshama or not. Because in the Kabbalah, it says that a person may see something, and he may be attracted to something, and he may not know why. A person may even be scared of something, and may not know where does this come from. So the Rambam tells us, he does not see it, but ma'amazal shelo ro'eh. Mazaleh hazeh. His mazal sense something. And it was in a shama. Just senses something and you don't know why you feel this way. You can't describe it. The more a person is spiritual, the more his mind is pure, not only is he a better judge, he will be able to immediately express a very, very powerful feeling of emotions, because what is really happening is his neshama is identifying that individual is the same like me. We're from the same root. We're from the same shoresh. So subconsciously, we are identifying something without knowing where it's coming from. And therefore, all of a sudden, all those emotions are coming out so easily. All those feelings are so powerful because it's pure. So the purer a person's mind is, the more humble he is, the more he can rely on those feelings. Furthermore, if these two individuals happen to be from similar elements, as we discussed in astrology, then that relationship will become even deeper. Because what did we say before? There has to be a physical connection too, not just a spiritual. It's not just, I have a feeling that this is going to work out, I just know it. You haven't even met her or him. You haven't gone out yet. When the two go out, if they happen to be from similar elements, then it will become even deeper. The chances for success are even greater. In any successful relationship, there has to be an astrological compatibility between the two. Otherwise, no matter what you feel towards a person, you will not be attracted to them. So what we see here is that there's a combination of things happening that are influencing one's mind and heart and attracting him or not giving him that feeling or feeling good with the person. In other words, being either detracted or being repelled by someone that he sees. Either you feel good or not. And what does it depend on? Well, if a person is humble, then he's able to judge that what he sees in front of him is maybe something similar to him, something that is compatible with him. If a person's heart, if a person's mind is not pure, all it could be that he's sensing is physical desire. Rabbis also tell us that the greater the love between two people is, the easier it will be for them to express themselves. Expression of one's feelings is easier, the communication is a lot more powerful when the two are just much more similar. In other words, they are the true bat-zug, the true soulmates. Therefore their expression, the level of expression towards each other will be much more powerful and much higher. And as the love grows between them, it will come easier to them. In dating, people complain, she just doesn't talk, she's so quiet. Or he was so quiet. Because there's a lack of expression, a lack of communication. As the two grow with each other, the deeper the love between them is, the easier the communication and the expression between them will also be. And last but not least, all of you remember what Shlomo Melech reminds us, Sheker Achen ve'hevel hayofi. Don't go by what you see, by the beauty, or by the grace, because the grace is sheker, it can mislead you. And beauty is hevel, is nothing by itself. Isha yirat Hashem hitit halala. Only a woman who's God-fearing is praiseworthy. What Shlomo Melech is trying to tell us is that it doesn't mean that Chen and Yofi are worthless. They are worthless if there is no Yirat Hashem. Sheker Achen ve'hevel hayofi can mislead you if you only judge by them. It needs further investigation into if he or she has good character, good nature, similar outlook, similar background if possible. As much as if you want to marry someone, that alone is not enough. You can't just base yourself on physical character. But it feels great. It's love at first sight. Yes, maybe. It feels good and maybe it's real, but you have to further investigate it. Because the bottom line is that that's not enough to build a marriage or build a successful relationship. Just beauty and grace and physical attraction. There has to be other powerful foundations, and the most powerful foundation is Yirat Hashem. If the two are God-fearing, they will have similar goals. Rabbis remind us that for a man to be zocheh, to find his soulmate, and not to make a mistake by relying just on his physical attraction, he has to be very careful with zera lematana, not shedding his seed in vain, which is a whole subject in itself, but I need to mention it over here because for those who are wondering why it has taken them so long for the men, it's very possible because they were not careful in this particular area, because that affects the vision according to the Kabbalah. When one is careful with his zera, he will be able to observe many things that others cannot see. He may be even zocheh to Ruach HaKodesh, to divine inspiration. This is therefore one of the most powerful segulot, for one not to lose his soulmate, for one to find the soulmate at the right time, and for one to be able to determine, to sense that this is the one. The judgment will not be clouded. The vision will be clear, because the mind is pure, because he's careful in this one area of Zera Levatala. Throughout history, Am Yisrael has shown its love for Hashem, by willing to die for Hashem, by willing to sacrifice in order to preserve our Judaism and to stay Jewish. Very, very soon, B'ezrat Hashem, all of us will have the zechut, when the whole world will see that Hashem will show His love towards us when He brings B'ezrat Hashem the Mashiach. With Rabbi Kin.
How much free will do we have in our choice? If Hashem is going to bring your soulmate to you, should we have a couple that will bring the right one to you? And how much free will does the person be married?
Yeah.
Is it really our choice, or is Hashem basically saying you will marry that person?
If you conduct yourself properly, you do everything that's right, there's no reason for you to doubt that Hashem will bring you your true soulmate, that you will find her at the right time, even if it takes a little bit of time. If one does not conduct himself properly, there's a chance that he may lose her or she may lose him. So one has to do everything that's possible in order for him to maintain his purity. That will help him find his soulmate, and that will help him identify her, because his mind will be pure and he will be able to become a better judge. That will help us. To those who have love at first sight, if their mind is pure and they are in full control of their yetzer, maybe what they're seeing is true. Those who are not pure, it could just be passion. It all depends on the purity of one's mind. The purer one is, the more control he has over his yetzer, the better judge he can be, a judge of people, and the judge of if this is his soulmate. And the feelings that he will have will also be real, because he's identifying a neshama over here, and his neshama is identifying another neshama. It's at a much higher level. It's not just on the physical level. So that's what it depends on. So some people know it right away. It has to do with the purity of their soul, the purity of their mind, I should say. For others it takes longer, but even for those that it takes longer, it's okay, because as it is, love takes time to grow. Even for those who know it right away, it needs to make roots, it needs to mature. And in order for it to mature, it will take some time. But if you're lucky and you feel it the very first moment, fine. And not everybody does it, it's okay. As long as you feel good about it, and as long as you pray to Hashem for it, and you've done everything for it, there's no reason for you to doubt that He will not lead you to the one that belongs to you. We have to have tremendous amount of bitachon Hashem that He conducts the affairs of shidduchim, of bringing two people together. That's His department. If we behave ourselves, there's no reason in the world to doubt that it will not happen. It will for sure happen. Just don't be picky. Just don't be too picky. Be reasonable, be somewhat rational, and if you have good feelings about it, and you investigate it, and there is yirat Hashem and midot kavod in the family and in this individual, then go for it. And I have no doubt that one who conducts himself properly, Hashem will not allow him to make a mistake, because this is the most important investment of his life. If it's the Ezer Kenegdo, he will succeed. If it's not the real soulmate, it won't be the best relationship. You may feel okay, but it will not be the best. So this requires zechuyot, this requires merit, it requires prayer, and it requires good conduct in order to guarantee that the Hashem you will find your soulmate.